So, Kate, would you like to begin?
Sure. Seriality, sequence, series, set. Repetition, multiplication, suspension, spacing, difference, loops, boredom, method, grid, sameness, bland, deductions, replication. One of the features of modernist works of art is in the way they employ modes of repetition and sequence. All art, of course, repeats in that there is an assertion of style within the way it is constituted, but modern temporality brings with it a desire to suspend the image or material into modes of serialized encounters.
So just starting from, I mean, it's mainly pertaining to modernity. I didn't want to extend it too far out from looking at modern period. And the first great serialized painter is Monet, of course, who tended to just take a single motif like a haystack or a group of trees or a pond, a garden, and repeat them in different conditions of weather and different lighting effects. So this is a haystack. Let me just let in. I lost my. I lost my arrow.
Claude Monet was the first major artist of the modernist period who systematically painted multiple versions of the same image. Paul Cézanne painted numerous depictions of Mont Sainte-Victoire.
The late rendition. This is Mondrian, Elie Mondrian. Did a lot of studies of trees.
Piet Mondrian repeated studies of the same landscape motifs in an attempt to capture the underlying abstract reality principle.
That's the difference between Monet, which is more or less the surface effects of light, whereas Mondrian is much more Platonic, much more the idea of the inner structure, the inner workings of the natural order. So he goes in search of the abstract principles that underline appearance. And this is Brancusi, the bird in space, who took a single motif and tended to repeat it in different materials and different configurations.
Brancusi had a relatively small number of motifs, but he would make multiple versions of the same subject or the same configuration or posture. Repetition in his work became a vehicle of refinement.
That's a different, so from Monet to Mondrian to Brancusi, a different relationship to repetition. Again, is Brancusi. This is Picasso. He did over 50 versions of Velázquez Les Meninas. He was obsessed by it for a period. I think he did 58.
Picasso produced a whole series of painting based on Velázquez Laminanas. Sorry. He started this undertaking in 1957 and produced 58 paintings, which in part he viewed as a process of forgetting.
So again, that's a different relationship to a series, or a set, or.
So when you say a process of forgetting, is that he's moving away from the original by looking only back at what he's most recently painted?
I mean, he's trying to overcome his relationship to it.
Mhm.
So simultaneously, it's an act of memory, but it's also an act of forgetting. It's bringing closer the relationship between oblivion and memory. So it's clear that it's not a mimetic exercise. It's not an attempt to copy the painting, but attempt to find a relationship to it, and in that way lose another relationship to it, find another relationship by forgetting the first relation and the second relation and the third relation and so forth.
Mhm.
So again, is yet another mode of repetition.
The trope of the double is present throughout Rene Magritte's art. In the painting Golconda, 1953, the recurrent image of the man with the bowler hat is stationed in space as a serialized repetition of this selfsame image. The theory of the subject represents one of the most complex sites of inquiry in Lacan's work. Fundamentally, the subject is decentered across the registration of three different orders of the symbolic, the imaginary, and the real. For Lacan, the subject comes to be in language, but is overdetermined by the linguistic structure, thereby contesting the subject's enunciative function. The subject is both the focus of analysis, and yet analysis needs to depart from the subject to account for the structure of overdetermination that constructs it. In this account, there is a gap in the being of the subject. And this is the reason that Lacan disdained the idea that the subject, centered by the ego can never assume an autonomy. The thinking subject is unable to constitute truth, for it is not the author of discourse, because discourse itself exceeds the subject within the process of overdetermination. The subject is never quite whole. So to explore the subject, it is necessary to explore the linguistic schema that issues from the subject's speech, utterances, and slips of the tongue, and recollections of dreams. When the artist finds himself, he is lost. The fact that he has succeeded in never finding himself is regarded by Max Ernst as his only lasting achievement. Max Ernst.
There is Max Ernst. So it's a sort of enactment of the decentredness, really, the impossibility of fully finding oneself or being a symmetrical relationship to yourself, where one's reflection is somehow one's image.
Giorgio Morandi painted the same vessels repeatedly without any sign of boredom. Giacometti's drawings, paintings, and sculptures were predominantly cast in a frontal posture, as if looking at a fixed point in the distance. This was derived in part from the visual template of Egyptian sculpture.
There is a kind of, he went to the Louvre a lot and tended to draw from Egyptian figures. Sharon, if you read now. Thank you, Kate. He tended never to finish his sculptures. It's only his brother Diego who tended to go and rescue the sculptures and get them cast. That he would never have let a sculpture go out of his studio because he wanted to endlessly, he could never finalize his relationship to them. It's a continual process of becoming other than what it started out to be. It's Rothko. Sharon.
Mark Rothko worked within narrow templates of pictorial and chromatic organization, mostly with 3 vertical cloud-like bands of pigment.
There's a couple of. Here's a Newman painting.
The zip or line through the painting became the signature of Barnett Newman's paintings. The zip represented an idea of presence and even being itself, and the repetition of this motive, the assertion of its ontological bearing. Like Rothko, his paintings were described as opening out the terrain of the abstract sublime, and with this, the notion of immeasurability and intensity. Ad Reinhardt created all black paintings which utilized layering of colors beneath the final black. These black monochromatic paintings served as a quest in order to present the absolute.
Is Joseph Albers, who painted the same motif for over 20 years, I think 25 years. He didn't change his geometrical structure, just his relationship to the chromatic relationship to that structure.
Joseph Albers painted within the same geometrical format for over 20 years. Every painting both repeated but also staged its own difference. We've been trained to think of patterns, with the exception of those of music, as fixed affairs. It is easier and lazier that way, but, of course, all nonsense. In truth, the right way to begin to think about the pattern which connects is to think of it as primarily, whatever that means, a dance of interacting parts, and only secondarily pegged down by various sorts of physical limits, and by those limits which organisms characteristically impose.
With Gregory Bateson, who wrote The Deep Ecology of the Mind and Nature, and he did studies of schizophrenia and alcoholism and Balinese agriculture, and amongst other things, he also developed series of information systems. So it was mainly in the 50s and 60s. So in a way, he was very influential on the thinking of Gilles Deleuze. His idea of loops. His idea of loops was that, for instance, when someone approaches chopping a tree down, they start to cut, and immediately a circuit is set up, a loop is set up, whereby the tree sends a message through the axe to the mind, through the body of the subject cutting, to cut cut next. So there's a sort of implicitly one system, a setup of information, and it becomes automatic. So it's as if the axe tells the person where to swing the axe, and the tree provides the information to the axe, and it's a complete continuous circle. So it's faster than thought. There's no thinking goes up. It's just an automatic process almost, which is a high level of organization of information through organic and inorganic material. Jasper John's Three Flags.
Lucio Fontana's work consists of incisions into the canvas on a monochromatic ground. Maurice Louis was a color-filled abstract painter who explored visual purity through a limited number of abstract templates. Veiling, staining, refining all began to be the subject matter of the painting, stripped of external reference or connotation.
So in a way, serialization is almost an attempt to get away from fixed index, a sort of more a relationship to a floating index, whereby materiality starts to become predominant, such as staining or veiling, or these are huge paintings. So they envelop the spectator in a field of color. It's Maurice Lewis. So Agnes Martin, on a clear day, she primarily used a grid structure for her paintings. But it's far from being a sort of mechanical grid, very sensuous, very subtle, almost very serene, sort of mystical rather than mechanical.
Manzoni tended his own shit as a form of biological found object. It was sometimes joked that it formed a currency that aligned this abject matter with money. Francis Bacon often utilized the triptych as a device or a vehicle for repetition.
Went to see the show at the Audubas Gallery on Savile Row, where there's a relationship between Bacon and Warhol and repetition and serialization and color, particularly within the context of portraits or portrayals of the subject. They met 2 times, once in Paris at the, I think Bacon was showing the Grand Palais, and then the second time in Metropolitan Museum, when he was doing a show in the Metropolitan Museum in New York, he met Warhol. They both exchanged ideas to do with serialization and color.
Warhol repeated images such as that of Marilyn in endless configurations. It was as if he was attempting to keep the image alive.
This is from his test series of films, which are 100 feet of film, which is just over 3 minutes, where he'd film. The person wasn't allowed, well, he didn't have a sound recording, but not allowed to speak, just look at the camera, look back at the camera. And then he projected them on an even slower speed. So it slowed down the speed of projection. So the image became really slow motion, very awkward. Often the subjects in question couldn't keep hold the relationship to 3 minutes attention.
The test series by Warhol all consisted of a standard 100 feet of film, which lasted for just over 3 minutes. Aesthetic indifference was the main feature of this undertaking.
And also, what's interesting, he never showed these. He made some of the test series into the basis of a film, like Chelsea Girls, but he never showed the test series as a work. It was shown after his death. They found a lot of film in his studio which wasn't developed, and developed it and did an exhibition of the test series works.
Carl Andre's sculptural practice is founded upon measurable units of materials such as bricks, metal, or wood forming geometrical configurations.
The Louis Bourgeois spirals. There's Richard Serra drawing in 5 parts. This is Solowit, one of his wall drawings, which started off as just instructions. So he'd give an instruction, and someone would perform or execute the relationship to the instruction. So there's a kind of indifference to the execution, or a mechanical relationship to the instruction. It's not got a creative relationship, it's instructional.
Solowit's wall drawings are generated by an instruction which is then translated technically by a third party. In his early work, grids were employed as a unifying device. In contrast to much of minimalist sculpture, which is industrial in its aesthetic orientation, the work of Eva Hesse takes on an organic appearance, even though it might employ repetition.
Eva Hesse. a drawing by Eva Hess.
Steve Reich emerged from serial and minimalist strands of experimental music.
So we might listen to music for 18 musicians after the presentation.
Gamelan music is made up predominantly of percussive instruments. Composers such as Philip Glass and Steve Reich were influenced by the complex all-over sound. The term Danshaker, one-color painting, is the term that is applied to Korean monochrome painting of the 1970s onwards.
In many ways, they have a relationship also to Korean porcelain. They're not just a relationship to painting and Korean calligraphy, obviously. They're extremely subtle and tonally very severe.
Onkuara's date paintings record the literal fact of time through the simple recording of dates within a standard typographical format.
So you just do a painting a day, and just with the date, and just repeated that throughout his career. And also sent postcards, which were then collected and serialized. And this is the work he did.
The Thanatophanes portfolio was published in 1995, draws upon much older drawings made in 1955 to 56, relating to victims of the fallout from the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There are 30 engravings in the set. The title, which is Greek, literally means death apparitions.
It's Blinky Primero, who's studied under boys or with boys, but he changed his name to American Gangster. Blinky Primero was a gangster in the United States in the period of the 1930s and to 50s. But it was a notorious gangster, but he changed his name to it. There's Gerhard Richter, 4,900 colors from 2007. This Alan McCollum produces massively serialized elements that mirror mass production. They're just black monochromes in different size frames. And he also produces elements of industrial templates, but in craft, and displays them. Again, a serialized way of presentation of work. Repetition and serialization and standard materials. This is from Michael Snow's film Wavelength.
Michael Snow's Wavelength, 1966 to 7, is a 45-minute film shot in a photograph on a wall in a darkened interior that is in turn interspersed with forays into a crime scene.
This is Hollis Frampton, a film they made, which is called Nostalgia, a small L-N.
And it was made up of a series of still images slowly burning one at a time on a hot plate. The sound and the image are recorded within different time sequences. This double time has a compelling way of reflecting upon the relationship of image and time.
This is some stills from Malcolm McGrice's film Berlin Horse from 1970, which utilizes the looping of images in ways which almost makes time visible. The overall effect is hypnotic. So he just took footage of a horse going round in a circle and exposed the film in all different ways with different solarization effects and multiple exposures and color staining.
When a body combines some of its own distinctive points with those of a wave, it espouses the principle of a repetition which is no longer that of the same, but involves the other, involves difference from one wave and one gesture to another, and carries that difference through the repetitive space thereby constituted. To learn is indeed to constitute this space of an encounter with signs in which the distinctive points renew themselves in each other and repetition takes shape while disguising itself.
So, in other words, you have the relationship between the body and waves, and they're not one and the same movement, they're different movements. And the way it creates a conjunction between the two is what produces difference rather than repetition or synchronicity. So he's concerned with what falls outside of representation. He said that it's a field of signs, so in which difference is produced or the new is produced. It was written in 1968. It's one of his major, in a way, his first major book of original philosophy.
Robert Mascovitz explores multiple faceted depictions of the same subject as the Empire State Building or images drawn from artists such as Brancusi or Giacometti.
He was a second generation abstract expressionist, but he moved into a kind of area called bad painting or new image painting, along with artists like Philip Guston. This is Hockney's series of prints he did in the late 70s, where he took colored pulp paper and instead of printing, constituted the paper out of colored fabric. He just did these series of pool images. The printer called Ken Tyler.
In the late 1970s, David Hockney embarked on a large series of paper pulp prints of swimming pools. In all, there were 29 separate images in a recently formulated approach to print by the master printer Ken Tyler. The whole series present different fragmentary configurations of the pool, as if total absorption was realized.
That's one. Then we'll change the reader. Just do this one.
In the work by Marlene Dumas, Models 1994, there are 100 drawings that are presented in a grid-like formation. Rather than being idealized portraits of fashion or media models, there is a grim or matter-of-fact mode of depiction stripped of embellishments normally afforded to the portrait.
Who would like to read? Randy, you've got a great reading voice. I'm going to pick on you.
I can read.
Okay, you read.
Okay.
Hard Richter, 48 Portraits, 1972-1998. Masahisa Fukase, Garasu Ravens, 1977. Fukase photographed this motif many times as if it was a potent physiological thing, giving rise to an obsessive fixation. Cindy Sherman's art simply repeats the subject of the self-portrait, but each photograph in a different guise or context as if to explore endless possibilities. Each of the resulting images capture a sense of a double reality, that of an actress and that of some attempting to capture a semblance of the play of the self and the other. Robert Longo was closely identified for his serial depictions of figures that were either captured in a dance pose or as about to fall. The series of photorealist drawings had a generic title, Men in the Cities. This work is from 1980.
This is the Beckers, who started at Düsseldorf School of Photography. They're very famous. Let me just let someone in. No, I can't find my arrow.
Bird and Hila Batcher created a distinct aesthetic based on photographing industrial buildings and presenting them in a grid structure. There is an almost elegant mode of attention in the way these objects are depicted because the eye normally just passes over such objects within the industrial landscape. Andrea Gursky. Reneke Dijkstra's photographs are usually characterized by single portraits that then make up a whole. The range of the subject matter varies, but the strategy remains in place from series to series.
This is Sugimoto, the Ocean series. I've just written on the relationship between the Sugimoto show and the Maruyama show. I find the perfection of the Sugimoto show almost chilling, almost disturbing. It's almost like there's not a centimeter out of place or a lighting out of place, or the scale is just perfect given the architecture of the space. It's almost a sort of utopia of how an exhibition should be, but yet there's something which is dissuasive about it.
Do you feel
Originally-
like it? Do you feel like it doesn't need you? It doesn't need the viewer?
Well, I feel it excludes the subject, but it's too perfect. There's no dirt, there's no errancy.
Mm.
It just is beyond anything that you've seen before.
Interesting that it reflects on the floor that way too, you know, that the space mirrors the ocean horizon, the reflective and the, you know, the disappearing
I mean,
light.
this isn't the Hayward show. The Hayward show is even more cerebral than this.
And more controlled.
More control. It's the most controlled exhibition I've ever seen. And in that sense, I found it chilling. It was the opposite of a pleasure. I didn't find it pleasurable.
Mm.
I don't know if anyone else has seen it and what they think.
Yeah, even for the figures of the animals and of the human figure downstairs, it's also staged. It feels like everything is being controlled.
Everything's either waxworks or dioramas or old cinemas in time lapse or oceans in time lapse. It's like before humans and after humans exist. But there's no room any longer for the human being. The human being is eliminated from the scene. Any liveliness or memory is eliminated as a kind of post-human or pre-human vision.
Feels like nerd.
I mean, I love his work. I think it's absolutely incredible, and it's about time. I mean, these are very, very long exposures that he makes, and they're very arresting, and they're very much about photography.
I've seen his shows in other contexts, and I've not found the same response to his work.
Right.
The Hayward. There's something particularly about the Hayward show. And there's something about this post-production. I mean, when I originally saw the Ocean series when it was first shown in London, at the White Cube when it was in Mayfair, a small room in which they were just very small photographs, but very powerful. I saw his architectural series in Edinburgh when it was first shown, and again, very powerful,
Yeah.
very arresting, and very intelligent, very clear. But there was something about the Hayward show where I find it's obscene almost, because it's to do with power, will to outstrip anything else which exists within the visual field.
So it's to do with the way it was hung, not so much the work.
Well, it's to do with the apparatus of the whole presentation.
Right.
So I just found that chilling. It's not to do with the original, my response to the work over a period of time. It's not that. But I found made me think quite a lot about the difference between. I mean, Data Mariama is almost the opposite end of photography.
That's right.
And, the opposite end of presentation, so much more provisional, much more experimental, much more open, and much more imperfect. I find that more engaging as an exhibition. And it was the opposite. I mean, it was the opposite type of space. It was very claustrophobic, the Data Mariama.
Okay, keep reading.
Yeah.
Hiroshi Sugimoto photographed oceans in ways that froze the effects of time within their appearance, giving the sense of a prehuman duration. It is not possible to photograph time, and yet this series appears to capture the sense which comes with it. Ou Zhang created an archive of portraits of Chinese children, which were then organized into a grid-like presentation. Each of the lines of children have a distinct perspective which simulates the various viewpoints of Chinese classical paintings.
So at the bottom line, you're looking down at children. The middle perspective, you're looking into the same perspectival space, and then the top line you're looking up. So it seems to simulate these three views which you find in Chinese classical landscape paintings: a mobile, free-floating perspective. She did this work in 2004 at the Royal College. She was the first mainland Chinese student to come to Royal College.
Was she using a flash with these, or some of them anyway?
Sad?
Just wondering if she's using a flash.
I'm not sure what she did.
Yeah.
There's something to do with the coloration. She got the films developed in China. Maybe
Right.
different darkroom techniques.
Very saturated, the
Very
color.
saturated. So it's probably a commercial lab that did them.
Yeah.
She
I
had this,
remember her. I was there when she did that series.
yeah. What did you think at the time?
I liked them. Yeah, I got it. I just thought it's really smart. It's just a smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I worked with a lot with this series. I did Endless Crits.
Uh-huh.
Because it's just raw material to begin with. It's just photographs of children. It didn't have an organization.
Oh, you helped her to develop it then.
It helped to develop the idea of the different perspectival spaces. And
It's good.
this is Joseph Kosuth's One and Three Chairs, which he reproduced endlessly. And he dates it as 1965, which is not true. He predated the work, post-dated the work. But he doesn't allow it to be printed unless, reproduced unless it's with this date. And it wasn't shown until 1969. So he was predating others' conceptual work. But it's a repetition of the chair in photographic representation, a dictionary definition of a chair. But he did endless series of these in every other language and every other format.
Joseph Kosuth's One and Three Chairs works as a unity by virtue of tautology. It simply reiterates the reality of a chair in three different registers, which in turn frames the concept of a generic chair. Nothing can be deduced from this statement, as it simply presents a fact-like statement stripped of any surplus.
So it literally is what it is. A chair is a chair is a chair.
Rachel Whitered, Untitled 25 Spaces, 1995.
So it casts the space underneath a chair or underneath several chairs. It's Doris Salgado.
Is it Saucedo or so?
People.
Saucedo's idea was to create a topography of war, not tied to a specific historical event, but to war in general. Seeing these 1,550 wooden chairs piled high between two buildings in central Istanbul, I'm reminded of mass graves, of anonymous victims. I think of both chaos and absence, two effects of wartime violence. Ai Weiwei installed a set of 1001 Ming and Qing called Fairy Tale, 2007.
The Biennale.
Ai Weiwei had hundreds of thousands porcelain sunflower seeds handcrafted, and then they were presented as a mess on the floor.
This is Anish Kapoor's Void Field.
Anish Kapoor was initially strongly influenced by Yves Klein and his development of the monochrome. This gave rise to a fascination with the void, which was explored in different configurations. This linked minimalist and Zen aesthetics into a new hybrid set of forms typified by the work Void Field, 1989.
It is a series of prints that recently sold in a London auction at Phillips by Kapoor.
Damien Hirst produced a vast series of dot paintings with the idea of the repetition of each being a virtue. They neither add up nor reduce down, but float in their own space of assertion.
They must have done something like 1,000 dot paintings or even more. And you can make them to order. You can ring up the gallery and ring up the studio and get your own measurements and your own colors to order, and they'll be delivered.
Yayoi Kusama creates configurations of worlds out as sequences of similar motifs and visual templates. This enables the artist to order a network of signs and symbols into visual landscapes, and this is the basis of being able to shift worlds into fashion because the language can be read as a look.
Anthony Gormley.
He is now exhibited in YQ. Anthony Gormley works with serial sets of figures, each of which is presented as a like group. They each circulate with a space of their own emergence and with their own gestural orientation. Thus, repetition is linked to a language of assertion of a passive-aggressive stance within space.
That's meant to be critical. I mean, it's something for me very passive aggressive about his relationship to sculpture within space.
What about it feels passive aggressive? Like that he's just quoting, or
They just simply reiterate the same gestures without any right of reply. They almost seem to be authoritarian rather than emancipatory. They seem to conquer space. I saw a work in one of the Greek islands where he placed 30 sculptures on the so-called birthplace of Apollo. And he put them next to Greek sculptures and columns and architectural ruins. And it felt like a liberty that should be taken. It almost used it as a backdrop for his own sculptural project. So you got this sense of what the statement was, is there's a continuity between classical Greek sculpture of the Hellenistic period and the sculpture of Anthony Gormley, which is absurd and obscene and not very visually edifying.
so he's kind of being passive aggressive with art history.
With art history, yeah. And it's sort of like colonizing space. We'll come back to that later.
Vanessa Beecroft is best known for her performances, which are also like living paintings that invariably consist of female models. She creates regular collaborations with fashion labels such as Saint Laurent. Teaching Xie, 1 year performance, 1980-1981.
So simply clocked in every day into the same space and didn't do anything other than clock in to space for a year. So his works are always of long durations, always extreme in the performative aspect.
So he literally clocked in and hung out there for
1 year without.
No. He clocked in on a day.
Yeah.
And then did he hang out for 8
He was
hours?
in space. He was in the space for the rest of the time.
He had to, didn't he do it every 2 hours or something? I mean, he had to keep waking himself up all night as well.
I'm
I
not sure
think it's
the
every
tempo-
hour this piece, I think.
And these are like there were like little images of him below his time thing. So I wonder if there's stills from like proving that he was there.
I mean, there's a great.
No, my understanding is he did every day, like when we work in that sort of work, the clicking,
Factory.
isn't it the day, like a month and then
Shift. It's like
day
doing it.
of the
He did a
month?
shift. I think he did it, what we call a shift, a work shift, but there's no work. There's just the occupancy of time.
I think it was more than that, because I think that was what was so harrowing about it emotionally, was he actually did it it might have been every 4 hours, but it was definitely him constantly logging in, logging in, logging in.
Mm.
And you can see over time the photographs changing of him growing a beard and growing hair and doing all of that.
Yeah.
It's for 1 year,
Mm.
which nothing else happened other than clocking in. The work by the Turkish artists, Gökçek
Gökçek Akman.
Ataman.
Good Luck Ataman, 2003, constructed a series of 40 film interviews of people from an area known as Kuba in Istanbul. The work itself is a mixture of cinema and theater that generates a distinct registration of time. An essential feature of the overall work is the sense of discontinuity generated by the different perspectives of each voice.
So in the space, you had to go around sitting in a chair to listen to the interview, and obviously everyone had over 40 different chairs. You occupied different. There's almost an infinite variety of routes you could take and voices that you could listen to. So you had a sort of montage effect out of the raw material that was gathered. And it had this sort of feeling of 1970s discarded chairs and televisions. So there's something archaic about it, something throwaway. It was shown in London in Holborn in the abandoned post office. But I think it's one of the great works of the contemporary period. And it's been shown in a lot of different locations around the world. But a lot of the people in that area are Kurds and outsiders and prostitutes and political refugees, and so the police very rarely go in there. It's a sort of out area, and it's got a sort of an internal economy to it, and they have to self-police the area themselves. This is an overnight performance by the band The National, and it's a repeated fragment of a song, A Whole Lot of Sorrow. Sorrow found me when I was young, sorrow waited, sorrow, 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 so they put me on the pill. It's in my honey, it's in my milk. But it's just repeated, and they just had to keep repeating for 6 hours. They almost physically broke down doing it, the recording of the 6 hours.
The Japanese artist Ryoji Ikeda presented the work Dataverse, which translates processed information into images and sounds in the hidden facets of nature.
And he did a show recently at the Barbican.
He had one at 180 The Strand too, like 2 years ago. It was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
What was it consist of?
It was huge. It took over the whole space, and it felt when you went through the different types of it was like it was timed, so you were let, like a certain number of people were let into the next sort of area where something was happening. And so the thing that was happening was some sort of light was pulsing or beaming, or there was a room where there were speakers set up where you could only hear if you were standing directly between them. And there was data streaming up and down a table, and you could walk on like a light box that had data streaming. It was such an intense experience to be inside. It was completely black, everything except for these huge rooms, and there were like 15 of them that you went through. I felt like something was either downloading something into me or uploading like I felt like I was being scraped by a different kind of intelligence. And I'll tell you what, for like a couple of days after that show, I did not feel good. I was so fractured, and it had such a profound impact on me that I couldn't like make any art. Everything I was drawing was like schizophrenic. It was crazy. It was a really intense experience.
Yeah, I also feel this is not one of, just the best immersive art exhibition that I've experienced for the 108 strand, 180 strand. That one, it's a huge like variety of different media and different kinds of installation, different kinds of use of light, and with many like incredible detailed, not only like projection, but also like every kind of media that you can think of.
And the fact that there were people that were saying, okay, go ahead, it sort of felt like the room was being like it was like a clean room or something, like it was being cleaned or prepared before the next batch of us went in. And so it was very, it took on a really different connotation than like waiting your turn to go into an infinity room, which kept you situated in the museum. Like you definitely left whatever environment of reality there was and went off into this other place. Yeah, it was, yeah, super intense.
This is Christian Maclay, Doors, which was recently shown at just opposite the Royal Academy in White Cube. The serial film consisting of doors opening and closing in sequence. It is without a sense of beginning, middle, or end. So you literally sat down wherever you started with the film, and it was just a loop. And some of the film images you recognize, and some of them were obscure. But each time it repeated the same: a door opening and a door closing, and the door opening was different from the door closing, the different film. It was oddly, I was very odd feeling of time. Look at who saw it, who went to see it.
Yeah, I saw it. It was great.
Me too.
And I felt like I wanted to keep. I was looking to find the beginning again. So I was looking to find the bit where I came in, and I was looking to find because every now and then he'd repeat the same sequence. So you'd be like, oh, okay, no, still not back to that bit I've seen already.
I had a really similar experience. I went and saw it twice, and I felt like at first I sat down and I was like, okay, I get it. And then I was like watching myself try to continue to make a narrative, and because they would keep adding little bits. And so you'd be like, oh, I know this one. You know, like your mind can't help but want to run to the end of it. And then it would cut to something surprising. And anyone that had been there more than 5 minutes would laugh because, you know, we get this aesthetic surprise, but also the need to think that the narrative was going to resolve in some way. And then I think after you stay there even longer, then that need disappears and it just becomes this fascinating sort of other thing. Like once the mind could let go of that.
It's like a fragment of all the films you've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's really clever. It's really compelling.
He also did one with clocks. about, I don't know, 10 years or so
24
ago.
hours. That's 24 hours.
Yeah.
So it's literally end-to-end film of time registered in an index like a clock, or invariably a wristwatch or a clock
Clock in a film.
in a film. But it was 24 hours. You had to really have stamina to. I don't think anyone's ever seen it.
I still,
I spent 6 hours there.
6 hours.
Yes,
well,
I spent 6 hours there. I went back to 2012 when Christine first time showed that clock at Whitechapel. Oh, Whitehall, not Whitechapel, sorry.
it's amazing.
It's incredible. It was incredible. Just this one we just seen last time, right?
Oh, this is the end of the series. The end of the. So, what was the discussion we had about this show? There's over 20 canvases, each in similar color red, each with the same combination of colors almost, each with the same type of drawing. What did we surmise?
We had the feeling that there was a team of painters who each had a particular task to do on each canvas, and they sort of went from canvas to canvas and sort of made their mark and then moved on. So it felt as if it was quite sort of, I wouldn't say formulaic, but it was very kind of same palette, same sort of actions, and the background was consistently that strong color. So it didn't make me go back round and keep looking at them, which is something I've noticed in a few of the exhibitions I've been to lately, that I haven't gone back. I don't know if other people felt that as well.
It is a sort of a really strong sense of manufacturing the artwork, because each color and the strokes are all the same.
I mean, it's a complete different type of serialization. I mean, each one is a different drawing, but each one is the same execute. There's no. It feels like there's no expressive content whatsoever. This feels like a contradiction to it being a painting. It's getting close to being a print. I suspect they're each fabricated from a drawing which was projected. So there'd be someone who painted the red backgrounds, and someone who projected the drawing, and someone who painted in the colors, and someone who did the post drawing.
Shall I read or others?
Yeah, finish it.
Daniel Richter produced an entire exhibition at the Ropach Gallery. Each of the paintings appeared as expressive but also oddly serialized, as if part of an assembly-like production process that consisted of like or self-same paintings.
I feel there's something kind of very worrying about this trend towards serialization, as if it's taken on become a different apparatus, which is primarily economic. There's also saw an exhibition of Richard Prince at the Gagosian, which was a reconfiguration of all his early work, all his new image photographic works, where he appropriates commercial images, advertising images, and blows them up. But there the work of the 80s was completely different in feeling. It was smaller scale, more grubby, even. It's closer to the original Appropriation. And these are spectacular, very clean, very expensive frames, and no doubt a re-editioning of the work. So bigger and better and more seamless, less space, no dirt, no doubt, very emphatic, a sort of production, a sort of production into power.
I agree with you, but then I mean, when we were looking at the Warhols, you know, he was probably doing something similar. You know, you were saying that when he died, the back rooms of all the dealers were so full of so many Warhols, nobody wanted to know. I mean, the work wasn't worth anything. So, is it any different to be reframing and repositioning Warhol now?
It's so qualitatively moved on. It's so moved on. It's like Warhol being reconfigured for in a giant space, reconfigured, massively reconfigured and redrawn and with the latest technological devices, the latest framing and
AI Warhol, he would love it.
Projected on a wall or something.
You know, he's come back to life again. He's been reconstituted.
Did I mention recently I did an exhibition and there is there's a person who specializes in moving artwork and installation, and his say stage name or his work name is Andy Warhol. Everybody loves it. He traded as Andy Warhol.
but it's like the death of subjectivity or something. It's like where the gallery takes over the post-production of work and takes over a budget and a pricing structure, and it becomes a whole game of simulation and conquest. And it's exclusive because once you've got up to the pinnacle and the price pinnacle, it's like Koons produces work, which is just so expensive that you can't enter into the realm of the same production processes. It almost has exclusive production processes, which take 3 years to develop. So it's the threshold of technology. So I think the serialization has changed with technology, has changed from the early part of modernity to the middle part of modernity, post-war modernity to contemporary modernity or post-modernity. It's been changed by the apparatus has changed, and it changes the meaning of serialization. And serialization is equated with power, or that's just a feeling.
Just a question about the Sugimoto that you found disturbing in the Hayward. I mean, I just wonder if he would have wanted it presented like that.
I think he controlled it. I think it had been part and parcel of the process.
I think there's photos of him in the space. I think he's been there.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, nothing can exceed it. Nothing can follow it. I mean, it's something to do with the quality of the work, but it's as if a vision has kind of been cemented, which is flips it into something else.
Yeah. Strange.
It's like if you had a sort of infinite budget. I mean, like the British prints, they were taken from. I mean, there's sort of processes now where they can take a negative and really do. I mean, it's same with Marina Abramovich, some of the post-production work on her show is incredible compared with how it used to be presented. They become post-historical. They eliminate their own history.
So Richard Prince is still alive, right?
Yeah, very much alive.
So you can still have the rights or gain the rights to be able to rehash the work in this way with his permission. So
I'm not sure it's copyright. It's a sort of, I mean, he's being sued at the moment by a pop singer who took one of his images, American Heroes or something. He's being sued for appropriating their image.
I have a question to the group. Is it okay that I throw in something
Yeah.
in relate to print? Again, at one of the recent exhibition, I began to talk with somebody, American lesbian. He said, I have first print signed by artist of, say, Jonathan Myers. So the situation, there is original work, and there was a print, couple of prints done by the gallery person or someone, and artist had the very first proof signed off, I guess, to see the colors or composition whatsoever. And this person, John, was saying these things are worth a lot more than just simple print because it's artist signed very first proof. Does group has any opinions? Personally, I'm not sure about the print of the original work or whether artist signed very first proof has any more value than the other commercially produced print, other things. Just want to throw the question into, I guess, big umbrella under the commercialization of the original work.
I think that has to do a little bit with it, like as the function of like the endurance of the contact of the artist with whatever the object is. So, and like an artist's proof means that it passed under a certain level of scrutiny and personal contact with the artist and is the one from which all others follow. So it becomes some sort of real object, and this, you know what I mean? And the additions afterward become less, and it's only through that duration because of the mythologizing that people do about the role of the artist. I think, you know, there's this thing of like it's more valuable because it's more, I don't know, some of the ephemera gets really fetishized.
Your situation, say Bridget Riley is one of the artwork. He does have a Bridget Riley. And say Bridget Riley has signed 10, no, say 3 very first proof of one of her work. Does it worth more? I mean, according to this guy, John, he was very proud owner of this, one of the first
Artist
prints.
proof is worth more. Artist proof is worth more than the edition. So often the edition is in 6, 10, 50, 100 for prints. So there's a kind of serial rule about the edition size. And you can't do the same, you can't re-edition work unless you change the scale. So what galleries have done a lot is they keep reconfiguring the scale of the work and say it's a different work, it's a different edition. So the Sugimoto Ocean series, for instance, was when it first shown in London, it was in editions of 6. And the first 3 were $3,000 and the second 3 were $5,000, which encouraged you to buy very quickly. And it gave you the anticipation that they're going to go up. The next buying round would be more expensive. But they've been reeditioned multiple times in different sizes. So there's dozens of Ocean series, just as there's dozens of Damien Hirst dot paintings and so on and so forth. So there's been this massive multiplication of editioning, both paintings and sculptures. So sculptures usually do bronze casts, either 3 or 6, edition of 3, 6, or even 10. So Jeff Koons probably does an edition of 10. And for instance, there's a print in the Gagosian of a double portrait of Richard Prince and Cindy Sherman, and that was an edition of 10, and one was sold in Hamburg for 240,000, which means the 10 are worth 2.5 million for a photographic print. So editions can fetch far more money. Vastly more money. So an Andrus Gursky photograph can sell for over 1 million, but there's an edition of 3 or edition of 6, and it makes the whole overall work very expensive, or the money invested in that work very expensive.
I am recently making a work about the editions, the understanding of editions. Once I make it all out, I will present to you. And I also had I feel all the editions depends on the honesty of the artist and how you see your reputation to the market. For example, for Prince, I think his root of his artistic root is just to have the suit, challenge the market, and finally I'll make the money. It's the point for him. That's what I feel about that. So he doesn't care about the suit. He doesn't care about like the reputation bad side of it, but he can make story to the art world and to challenge all the rules, challenge the people's understanding, and that's his point.
Okay, we better switch on to the crit today. We've got